Today is kind of a full circle moment for me and the channel, because one of the first reviews I ever did, and one of the first ones that ever really started getting any traction, was on the Citizen Avian, a colorful solar-powered pilot-style Flieger from Citizen. And this is a watch that's still somewhat popular, and that video now has over 100,000 views. Well, today I got another solar-powered Flieger for you, and I think this one outdoes the Avian. Because this one is a little smaller, made of titanium, and get this, comes with sapphire. Yes, Citizen does use sapphire. It's the BM8560-53E, and it's also known as the Citizen Garrison. For this one, Citizen went with a mid-sized 42mm case. Lug to lug is a comparable 48.5, and total thickness is a slim 10.5mm. Water resistance is 100 meters. As I already mentioned, the crystal is a scratch-resistant sapphire. Case and bracelet are also supposedly made from Citizen's super titanium, which is titanium but also includes a scratch-resistant coating, at least according to their website. Not to mention, this one also weighs in at a paltry 86 grams on its bracelet, give or take a link or two. And it's all powered by Citizen's E101 Eco Drive movement, a solar-powered quartz movement with a day-date complication. So, just to sum it all up, the Garrison is a fairly capable, scratch-resistant, extremely lightweight watch, which, as long as it gets a little bit of sunlight here and there, should give you a decade or two of problem-free service. Now, that's what I call a tool watch. And from the case, that's what Citizen wants you to think here as well. It's a fairly simple design that's almost entirely brushed. There's no chamfers, no signed crown, no real elegant tasteback design. It's pretty utilitarian, with the one exception being the polished top of the bezel, framing in and highlighting the crystal and dial, as that's really where your eyes should be focused on this one. The dial layout here is also pretty straightforward. Everything's painted on, there's no applied markers, which gives the watch a slightly flat feel, and that is a bit of a trade-off for just how thin this one is. However, while it is a fairly straightforward design, there are a couple of interesting elements here, such as the outer edge, which has a circular groove etched into it. It's subtle, yet makes it a little bit more interesting by breaking up and dividing the dial, and in some ways it really helps the Arabics stand out, as well as the raised chaptering at the very outer edge, adding just a touch of color with its red markings. And then there's the indices. Now, for those of you who aren't watch collectors and you're just looking for a great everyday watch, you're on the right track. And if you're not familiar with the term Flieger, it's just a type of pilot's watch. It's actually a design that dates all the way back to World War II Germany. So, not only is it a design with some real history and heritage, but it's also an effective one, as it's persisted this long in the industry. There are reasons that people love them and continue to buy them. In fact, there's a few German companies like Laco that still primarily make Fliegers. Although it should be pointed out that while a lot of us will look at this and immediately think Flieger, this one isn't exactly a pure Flieger design. Citizen changed a few things up, mostly by adding dashes at the cardinal points, breaking up the dial a little bit while introducing a crosshair-like element into the design, just to focus your eyes better. The hands are also a little bit different than your typical Flieger, using a more traditional sword handset. It's really a minor change-up to a classic design, but overall the watch is still very easy to read with a massive presence, at least for a 42mm. It's a clean, straightforward, and functional design. And that right there, in a lot of ways, is really the true essence of a Flieger. They were designed so that German pilots could quickly glance at them and get the time, and not get distracted or lose focus while they were dogfighting Snoopy. Now, compared to today's watches, those original Fliegers were really large. So the Garrison here is definitely small in comparison. For its size, the dial seems wide and expansive. In fact, other than this really narrow, minuscule date window, I'd say that this one would be a great choice for someone whose eyes are starting to get a little bit older. Although, I also gotta mention here that this one has a bit of a reflection issue, as you can see. I'm glad that Citizen is finally embracing sapphire, but now they need to learn about anti-reflective coatings. And the only thing that I really don't like here is the off-yellow lume on the indices. And granted, this is a little bit more of a personal quirk, but I would have vastly preferred it if they just used a standard white lume. And speaking of lume, Lume here is good, at least for a Flieger. Yet it's not quite as good as I'd typically expect from Citizen. Mostly due to the choice of the Lume here, that off-yellow Lume, or as I like to call it, Fadium. And that's because this off-yellow Lume never seems to last as long as other types. It looks good in the daylight, but at night it doesn't quite perform as well. In my comparison test, the dial fades out pretty quickly, except for the cardinal points, which in some ways is kind of cool because it really shows off that crosshair. However, the important bit here is the hands, and they fade out just a little bit before a Seiko diver. And for a non-diver, that's still pretty good. Now, this particular colorway comes with a bracelet, while most of the others only come with a strap. The bracelet here is made with the same super titanium as the case, which means extremely lightweight with a scratch-resistant coating. It is a little rattly, and the design is fairly simple, but considering the price, I'd say it's a pretty good bracelet. You have solid links, solid end links, and a pressed push-button clasp. Honestly, the only downside I really see here is that there's only 2 micro adjusts on the clasp. So you might not be able to get that perfect fit, but you should get one that's good enough. And overall, as lightweight as the entire watch is, paired with the slight taper of the bracelet, this one is very comfortable, and that is the most important thing. With these male end links, I was actually expecting a little bit of an overhang with my 7¼ inch wrist. But overall, with its aggressively angled lugs, I'd say it's a pretty good fit. Physically, it feels like a true 42mm should. But visually I think it has a larger presence than you might expect. The dial seems to be very wide and expansive for its case, at least compared to a 42mm diver, looking more like a 43, maybe even a little bit larger. So the Garrison is probably not a good choice for those in the 40 and under crowd. But if you like the look of a larger watch, this one might be a good one for you, as you get that larger presence with the comfort of a 42mm on your wrist. Finally, let's talk price and value. While MSRP is sitting around $425, right now they're actually selling on Amazon for $180 to $250, depending on which color you want. And for a titanium solar watch with a scratch-resistant coating and a sapphire crystal, I'd say that's awesome. Heck, that's why I bought it, just so I could share it with all of you. And that scratch-resistant coating is a very important thing to note here. While titanium is much lighter than steel, it unfortunately shows scratches a lot easier. So throwing in that coating makes this a perfect combination. Now, back to that avian for a second. Longtime viewers of the channel may remember that for a while, I was always starting the video by walking around some random location. And the avian review was actually the very first time I did it, and I was completely nervous and just having a heck of a time in the heat trying to remember what I was going to be saying. I actually really like doing that as a way to start these videos, but after a while I stopped, and it was just because it was so time consuming. Just in terms of finding the right time to do it. Because if the sun was too hot, I was sweating to death, or if it was directly behind me, the camera was getting a lot of glare. Now, I've learned a lot since then, and I do have some better gear, so at some point I may go back and try that every once in a while. But this right here, this whole setup is so much easier and so much more time efficient. Anyway, back to the Garrison. Bottom line, easy to read, great tool watch look, sapphire, solar powered, lightweight, and scratch resistant. So just hard to go wrong here. Personally, I'd still prefer it if it was using white colored lume instead of this off faux colored lume. But other than that, this is one of the better eco-drive watches I've looked at. And definitely one more people should know about. So if you're not a collector and you're just looking for a great everyday watch, then this is one you should definitely consider. And even if you are a collector and you prefer automatics, I think everyone still needs at least one go-to quartz watch. These days for collectors, that seems to be more Casio or a G-Shock. But if you're not into that and you want something a little bit more classic looking, this is still a solid offering. As usual, let me know what you think about this one down below, and if you can think of any other Citizen watches that are worth taking a look at, let me know that as well. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, click something down there. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.